The LGBT Resource Center, and welcome to Sex Week, even better than Shark Week. That's right. On your seats, you have some evaluations, and I know I hate filling out evaluations, but we want to make this programming that is relevant to you and that meets your needs. So if you could take a second just to fill out the part that's demographics, then at the end, just tell us how we did. So we'd really appreciate it if you could do that. We'll take time at the end for you to complete it. So today's program and all of Sex Week, even better than Shark Week, is brought to you by the LGBT Resource Center as well as some fabulous co-sponsors. The Women's Center, the Dean of Students Office, Women and Gender Studies, Human Resources, the LGBT Faculty and Staff Association, and the student organization Voices for Healthy Choices. So at this time, I'm happy to introduce our speaker, Robyn Ochs. Robyn is editor of the groundbreaking anthology Getting By, Vanna, please, Getting By, Voices of Bisexuals Around the World. She's also the editor of Bi Women newsletter, which we have in the center. Copies available on the back table, and co-founder of the Bisexual Resource Center. Her materials are on the back table along with some fabulous buttons that are for sale and some bracelets, which she'll tell you more about. Robyn is the recipient of numerous awards, including the prestigious National Gay and Lesbian Task Force's Susan J. Hyde Activism Award. Robyn married her longtime partner, an alum of Grand Valley State University, in Massachusetts on May 17th, 2004, which was the first day it was legal to do so. Thank you. And today, Robyn will present Beyond Binaries, Identity and the Sexuality Spectrum. Please help me welcome Robyn Ochs.
Hi. Hi, I'm really excited to be here. And my wife is also really excited that I'm here. This is my second time at Grand Valley, and the first time she was just beside herself with excitement. She's like, that's my school, that's my school. I said, I know, that's my school. So I bought her a really nice hoodie that says GVSU. So when I get home, I'm gonna get lots of brownie points. So, how many people here have ever seen one of my programs before? Raise your hand. Just a few. Before I forget, on the back table, I have 2 copies of my book here, which are for sale. It's usually $15.95 or $16.95, I forget which one, and it's only $12 here. Do the math. The Bi Women newsletter is free. And you do not have to identify as bi to read it, and reading it will not turn you bi, guaranteed. And you also do not have to identify as a woman to read it, and reading it will not turn you into a woman, also equally guaranteed. So, but it's a newsletter by and for bi women, but I also want people who aren't bi to read it because I want people to learn about bi identity and educate themselves. So if you want to educate yourself, there it is. It's also free. A couple years ago, right? 1970, you do remember 1976, but a few of you do. I came out in 1976 at a time when nobody was talking about it. There was so little public discussion about that identity. And here I was, 18 years old, my first semester in college, figuring out, oh my goodness, I'm bisexual. I'm attracted to men, women, really, both? Whoops, what does this mean? What do I do? And I didn't really have any place to go. I really felt like there was no support out there. This is a time BG, before Google. So I really couldn't go get information that way, right? And how many of you have ever had something that you had questions about that you weren't exactly comfortable asking your parents about that you went to Google for support, right? Google is great. She provides support groups, she provides information, she provides all kinds of great stuff, YouTube videos, everything, right? So this is before Google, so there was no place to go there. I did go to the public library and my college library, and in the card catalogs, this is even pre-computer stuff. They had been invented, but they were things that you had punch cards and stuff. So I went to the library and I looked up the cards, and there really wasn't anything good there either. And I was also too scared to even, because to check out a book from the library, you have to check out a book from the library in front of a librarian, right? And I wasn't ready to do that. And so basically, I kind of came out in this void of silence. A few years later, I finally started telling other people. I moved to Boston. We started a support group called the Bi Vocals. And we were vocal. And we started like advocating and speaking up and responding to nasty things we read in the paper and just like really being out there. And then we ended up starting an organization called the Boston Bisexual Women's Network, which is the organization behind the Bi Women newsletter, which I now edit. Anyway, so all of a sudden I was like a bisexual advocate. And why did I do it? Because no one else was doing it. I did it because no one else was doing it. And I was a person who had grown up thinking, I want to change the world. I did, I really did. I grew up in a family where like a lot of people were trying to change the world, and I thought, I want to change the world too. But everything I cared about, everything else I cared about already had good leaders. I thought, in the environment, there are really good people doing that. Save the seals. There were really good people saving the seals. Save the puppies and the kittens. You know, there were people doing that. Women's rights, yay, there were people doing that. Civil rights, there were people doing that. I felt like everything I cared about was being done pretty competently by some really good people, but nobody was talking about this topic. Or at least very, very few people, and that's how I became a bisexual expert. I started writing stuff, I started speaking, and I've been doing that ever since. And I'm telling you this to get to the present, which is that about 10 years ago, after having been a professional bisexual for a really long time, not necessarily calling myself that, but doing it, I started getting a little bit restless. I started thinking, I do not want to be a one-horse pony. One-horse, what's the word? One-trick pony. I do want to be a one-horse pony. I didn't want to be a one-trick pony. You know, I didn't want to just have one topic that I kept talking about, and I was getting a little bit tired. And then so I thought, well, what else would expand on what's going on, and what else do I need to learn more about? And I started going in two different directions. One was to step back from bisexuality as one identity, to think about the landscape of identity, to think about all identities. And the other was to think more about gender, about sex and gender, because I was learning that those things are also not binaries, that sex and gender are both things that exist on a continuum, just like sexual orientation, and I started learning more about that. And so because I wanted to read more, I thought, well, maybe I'll incorporate it into a class I'm teaching, or I'll do something, and then I'll have to learn about it, which is what I did. I put in a course proposal in the spring, and then I spent the entire summer reading every book I could possibly find about gender and sexuality and transgender identity, and like really educating myself about a topic that I didn't yet know enough about. And then the thing about the landscape of identity got really exciting to me. I got really excited in this idea because I realized that to talk about bisexuality as this thing that exists all by itself separate from everything else, was partly missing the point. Because bisexuality doesn't exist all by itself. It's a social identity. It's socially constructed, and it exists in the landscape of identity. And it exists in interaction with other identities. For example, if you didn't have straight as a category, gay would not have the same meaning, or even probably any meaning, right? If you didn't have gay, bisexual wouldn't have any meaning. Like, it just completely, there are things that exist in relationship to one another and in constant negotiation with one another. So I started thinking about this bigger picture of the landscape. And then to stick on the landscape idea, I thought, landscapes, people. I started imagining a field full of people. Imagine a field, and there are people all over the field. And what we humans do, every single human being on the field is unique. Is there anyone here who's exactly like anyone else here? Right. So I started imagining like a field of people, and every single person is unique, each in our own special way, right? And what we human beings do is we look at that field and we say, okay, everything from this side, from this line over here is this category. And everything from this line on that side is that, we're going to call it that. That's what it is, right? And we'll make a subgroup over here of this side. Like if you're on this side of this, you're going to be this. And what happens when you do that? Is everybody comfortable with where they're put? Does everyone agree where the line should be? No, right? How many of you have ever been put into a group by someone else that didn't fit you correctly in any way whatsoever? Wow, almost everybody in the room. So I think what happens when we start to draw these lines, it's a very uncomfortable thing. And someone who's been put over here will say, no, I'm in that group. And someone else will say, well, I'm over here, but the line shouldn't be here, the line should be here. And someone else says, no, it should be over there. And then someone else says, no, there shouldn't be a damn line. Let's get rid of the lines. But this is what we do as human beings, and this is what we do around sexuality. This is what we do around sexual orientation. I really believe that every single person is as unique as a snowflake. And then we come in and we try to classify. And there are some very good reasons for classifying things, but classifying also has its costs. So thinking about the landscape of sexual orientation is very different. And then another visual image. How many of you are visual thinkers? Okay. We're going to come back to that field. Okay? Full of people. Except now we're going to have a field full of trees instead. Can you see the field full of trees? Where every person was, there's now a tree. We have lesbian trees. This is sign language for tree. Lesbian trees. We have trans trees. We have bisexual trees. We have queer trees. We have gay trees. We have just trees everywhere, right? Oh, we have straight trees. Lots of straight trees. Lots and lots and lots of straight trees all over the place, right? And I was thinking about that visual image, and I thought, in the United States, do we value all of our trees equally? We really don't. And I thought about my mom. My mom lives in the woods, and she has lots of acres of trees. And there are trees on her property that she loves, and she nourishes, and she has the arborists come in and take care of them and make sure that they get pruned and trimmed so that they don't, get sick. And she fertilizes some of the ones, especially the ones in her yard that are really precious to her, right? And then she has other trees on her property that she calls her scrub trees, the ones that were uninvited guests to her property, right? And they just grow, and every once in a while my mom comes in and she has them not clear cut, what do you call it, bushwhacked? She has them cut down. And I thought, wow, there's an analogy there. Which trees in our culture get the most nourishment and support? The straight trees, yeah. And I thought, wow, that's interesting, because I feel like it's not like we all get to choose our, I don't feel like we choose our sexual orientation at all anyway. I think for me, sexual orientation is something that we discover about ourselves. But we don't all get treated equally. It's not like somebody gives you this nice menu when you're in, let's say, 6th grade, and says, okay, here are the different options, dear. There's straight, there's bisexual, there's lesbian, there's gay, there's queer, there's all kinds of other labels. Which one would you like? And would you like fries with that? It's not that simple. It's not a neutral thing. In our culture, there's a lot of pressure to be what? to be straight. And so people who are not straight don't get the same amount of nurturing and the same amount of caring and the same amount of value in our culture. And I think that's an important thing also to take into account when we're thinking about sexual orientation, because it's not a level playing field. All things are not treated equal. It's hard to find the courage to come out as not straight, as any of those identities that are not straight. So those are my two landscape things. That's it. We're done with the landscape. Except what I want to talk about now is how 3 different really smart researchers have tried to map that landscape. Okay? And I have handouts. Who likes handing out handouts? One for this side. One for this side. Are the handouts all handed out? Yay. Maybe keep a few in the back just to, oh, you're not in the back. Okay, did you get one? Yeah, okay. Because I care. Okay, first person I want to talk about who tried to map the landscape of sexual orientation is the most famous sexual orientation mapper of all. Who might that be? Kinsey. Alfred Kinsey was an entomologist who studied bugs at Indiana University. I guess at some point he realized people are more interesting than bugs. And he undertook the first large-scale study ever done of human sexuality in the United States. 1948 was the year his book was published, his research study was published. And I want to mention 3 things that came out of Kinsey's research that are relevant to this discussion right now. The first thing that Kinsey did that I want to mention is that he showed empirically and with data something shocking. He showed that men are very sexual. Anyone here surprised? Did everyone here already know that? But he showed it with data. He researched thousands of men. He and his colleagues researched thousands of men, and they came up with data. Really important. And what's important about that too is that he found not only are the men that he researched very sexual in a thinking about sexuality a lot kind of way, but they were also very sexual in a breadth of sexuality kind of way. Including what kind of sexuality? Homosexuality. And that was huge. Kinsey found with data that about 30% of his adult male respondents had had at least one same-sex experience as adults. So not the same as what happened when you were 14 once, or like as adults. 30%. He also found that 10%, has anyone heard the number 10% before? Guess where that comes from? That number that we all know, what percentage of the population is gay? Comes from this study. He found that 10% of his adult male respondents had significant ongoing same-sex experience during a significant chunk of their adult lives. So they had at least a period of time in their adult lives when they were behaving in a gay kind of way. Is that the same as being gay? That's not necessarily, right? Is that the same as identifying as gay? No. Not necessarily either, but they did a lot of gay. They had a lot of gay, right? They were gayish at least, right? And that number was taken by the gay rights movement and used as an organizing tool. 10%. And the reason that number was so powerful Why was that number so powerful? Because what did most people think the percentage was before Kinsey? What do you think? If someone came up to you in the street in 1945 and said, excuse me, what percentage of the population do you think is gay, ma'am? What do you think you would say? 1? 0? 0.5? Anyone else? What does gay mean? What are you talking about? Pop, pow, poop, right? I mean, it was something that people really, I don't think, had much of a clue about. So his number of 10% was really important, because if you're someone who is in fact same-sex attracted and you're feeling like you're the only one on the whole planet and you hear that 10% number, that's a big number. 10% is really nice. There was a lesbian soap opera in Boston in the 80s called 2 in 20, and the subtag under that title was "Because 1 in 10 sounds lonely." You know. So that number was really powerful as an organizing tool. It was really powerful as a way to empower people. It was a really important statistic, and that comes directly from Kinsey. So, okay, men are very sexual. And by the way, Kinsey, like most researchers, focused his research on men. However, 5 years later, he made good, and he did a similar study looking at women. And the numbers, interestingly, were about half for women as they were for men, although I would have a lot of questions about why that was. In 1948, were women supposed to have open, comfortable sexualities? Absolutely, definitely. Today, are we supposed to? Still not there, but we've come a long way, right, baby? You know, we have come a long way, but we're still not there, but it was so much worse then. So I think that there were many, many reasons, cultural reasons, why women would be much less likely to acknowledge and affirm, you know, their own sexualities. Anyway, so that's Kinsey's first thing. Men and women are very sexual. Second thing that Kinsey gave us is that he put out the idea that human sexuality exists on a, yes, on a spectrum, on a continuum. He put out the idea that human sexuality exists on a continuum. Is that something that everybody knows today? So what's up with that? It's been 63 years. 63 years since the Kinsey report came out. Interesting, isn't it? And that was one of the central points of Kinsey's findings. It's a point that he emphasized throughout the book, and that the data showed throughout the book, that his respondents were all over the place. There's a great quote on your sheet, which only because I'm the only one with the mic I will read out loud. Normally I ask someone else to. But it says, it's in the top right-hand corner of your sheet. It says, males do not represent two discrete populations, heterosexual and homosexual. The world is not to be divided into sheep and goats. It is a fundamental of taxonomy that nature rarely deals with discrete categories. The living world is a continuum in each and every one of its aspects. I love that line. For me, that's poetry. The living world is a continuum in each and every one of its aspects. And by the way, taxonomy is a study of classification. Just because I didn't know that until I read this quote a long time ago, but I did have to look it up the first time I read it. Anyway, so he gave us the idea that human sexuality exists on a continuum. And the third thing he gave us is that he took that continuum and he drew a line, and he created something that he very modestly called the Kinsey scale. Someday there's going to be an Ochs scale. But he created the Kinsey scale, which is basically a 7-point line with 0 representing exclusive heterosexuality and 6 representing exclusive homosexuality, and in between 5 discrete numbers, but an infinite number of possibilities, right? So he put that out. We're going to use a version of that in a little bit. That's Kinsey. People are sexual. Sexuality exists on a continuum, Kinsey scale. Second person I want to talk about is a researcher who did his work about a generation after Kinsey. He's a psychiatrist whose name is Fritz Klein. And Fritz Klein, basically, in my mind, what he did is he recomplicated the Kinsey scale. Because one of the challenges of thinking about sexuality as a line, even if you acknowledge that there are multiple points on it, is it's not always clear what exactly you're talking about. If I said to you, for example, that I am a Kinsey 3, I am right in the middle of the Kinsey scale, what do you think I could possibly be saying to you? What kind of information might somebody imagine I'm saying?
You could just be saying that you're attracted to both men and women.
I might be just saying that I'm attracted to both men and women. Walking down the street, I'm attracted to both men and women. What else could I be saying? That I'm not attracted to either. I'm equally unattracted to men and women. That's also true, I could be. What else could I be saying?
You've had experiences with both men and women.
I've had sexual experiences with both men and women. What else could I be saying?
That you're on the fence. You're neither.
Ouch.
Some people could, perceive it as that you don't know which side you belong to, far left or far right.
That I'm really far left or far right, but I'm undecided. Yeah, it could be some people definitely hear that as a point of indecision, although I've been at that point for 35 years, so. I always crack up when people say bisexuality is just a phase.
It's a long phase.
Oh, it's been a really long phase. It's lasted my entire adult life so far. Yeah, and more than 2/3 of my years so far, yeah. Including ages 2, 3, 4, 5, yeah. What else could I be saying? The clues are on the bottom of the left of your sheet. What else could I be saying?
Think about emotional and social preferences as to who you would prefer to interact with or connect with.
Right, I could be talking just like who I like to, like who do I connect with, right? And then one more. Who do I think about? My fantasies, yes. Who do I fantasize about? So those are a lot of different things, right? But usually when someone says, I'm a Kinsey 3, or I'm a Kinsey 6, or I'm a Kinsey 2, people think one thing, and usually what people think is sex. They think, oh, you've had sex with. And so I think that that's something that gets, the real complexity gets hidden under that thing. So what Fritz Klein did, in my mind, is that he reminded us that inside the Kinsey scale, Kinsey didn't just look at one thing. He looked at lots of different factors. So in my mind, what Fritz Klein is, he took the Kinsey scale, there's the line, right? And he reminded us that there was a lot inside of that it's a complicated construction made of more than one factor. And how's that for low tech? Fun with one piece of paper. So he reminds us there's a lot of complicated stuff within that thing. So if you say you're Kinsey 3, you could be talking about a lot of different things, or all of them, or any one of them, and you don't know, right? So he made up his own thing, which he very modestly called the, what did Fritz Klein call his scale? Yeah, the Klein sexual orientation grid. So Klein created the Klein sexual orientation grid, and he basically put 7 factors down, and across he put 3 things, because he added one more important factor, which is the idea of time. And here's a question for every single person in the room. I don't care what you call yourself in terms of sexual orientation. I don't care if it's changed or if it's not changed. It doesn't matter. How many people in this room understand your own sense of yourself as a sexual being, understand your own sexuality exactly the same way now as you did when you were 16 years old? I'm hearing laughter. One person. In a room of 100 people, I usually get a few. And how many people understand your sexuality different than you did when you were 16? Most people, and that's also what I usually see. And so I think that when I think like, well, today as of, what today's, September 27th, 2011, where would I put myself on the scale today, is different perhaps than where I might have put myself on the scale 5 years ago, or 10 years ago, and definitely different than when I was 16 years old. So I also want to say that the more old I get, the older I get, the more I realize that past is just one word, and that if I really wanted to graph my sexuality over time, I'd need a lot more categories. Like, do you mean last month? Do you mean last year? Do you mean 5 years ago? Do you mean 10 years ago? Do you mean 15 years ago? And that the older I get, the more inadequate the word past is going to be. But he added the past, present. He also added future ideal, which is it's more of a values question. It's a question, if you could be anywhere on the scale, where would you wish to be? Is he saying that you get to decide? It's kind of like asking the question, if you had $1 billion, to what charities and nonprofits would you donate all of that money, almost all of that money? It's not, we don't actually get the $1 billion, but it's really a values question. What would you prioritize? What would you want? So we asked that question as well, which I think is an interesting thing to think about. Even though I never experienced my own sexuality as something I got to decide, it was something I discovered. But it's still an interesting question. So anyway, that's what Klein gave us. And then the third person I want to mention is someone named Michael Storms, who did something very, very simple. Michael Storms was a sociologist. And he did something so very simple. How many of you ever did graphing in high school? Remember graphs with the x-axis and the y-axis? Remember those? And then you plot things. You put one thing here and one thing here. Well, he plotted sexual orientation in that he put attraction to people of a different sex than your own, attraction to people of your own sex. And what is interesting about this is that it separates them into two things that can be separately measured, right? And how many people in this room have ever heard someone say, there's no such thing as bisexuality? Yeah, too many of you. How many of you have ever heard someone say, it's not possible to be attracted to men and women both? Again, a lot of you, right? And I think that one of the challenges of this is that people somehow act as though if you have one kind of attraction, then you've used up your attraction potential. Like you want to get one choice, you'll get one vote or something. But the fact is that men and women are different. And some of us are attracted to only one, and some people are attracted to more than one. And just like, for me, the question of which one, you have to choose one, is as strange as saying, which kind of ice cream do you like, chocolate or vanilla? Does anyone here like more than one flavor of ice cream? You have to stand up for your rights, right? If anyone ever tells you you can only like one, then just don't even listen to them, right? But the fact is, first of all, you can like chocolate and vanilla. And furthermore, there are more than 2 flavors of chocolate, right? And more than 2 flavors of ice cream, and more than 2 kinds of vanilla. That it's all complicated, right? Just like sex and gender, they're all really complicated things. And there are more than 2 options anyway. So, but he, with his 2-option thing, he graphed that. And one thing I like about that is that it allows also not only for who you're attracted to, like the sex or the gender of the person you're attracted to, but it also allows for other variations in sexuality. How many people in this room know someone for whom sex is a central driving force, who thinks about sex a whole lot? I said know someone, so it's okay. Yeah. And how many of you know someone how many of you know someone who could take it or leave it, for whom sex is just not important? My mom has not been in a relationship in 25 years, and she has absolutely no desire to get into one, right? So what I like about Storms as well is you can be very, very attracted to men and women and be plotted out there. But you could also be very attracted to men and not at all attracted to women. So you'd be plotted over here, or very attracted to men and maybe just a little bit to women, or medium to both, or just none at all to either. And because another, I think, limitation of both Kinsey and Klein is that what happens if you have no sexual attractions? Where would you put yourself on the Kinsey scale? You could do what someone said before, equally unattracted to everybody, right? But in reality, you'd kind of fall off the scale. And so I really like Storms for that too, because you could be 0, 0. And so it's kind of anything can fit on here. And it's just a different way to draw a map. It's a different way to draw a map of sexuality. It has limited value in terms of how easy it is to talk about it. Like, what are you on the Storm scale? Well, I'm a 3.4 / comma, 1.7. Like, what does that mean? Nobody's going to know what you're talking about. But it is interesting just in drawing a picture of the landscape. Okay. What I would like to do now is to invite you to participate in a research study. And it's going to be an anonymous research study of the people who are in this room. Here's how it's going to be anonymous. I'm going to pass out questionnaire, one-page questionnaire. I'm going to ask each person in the room to fill it out and to be as honest as you can possibly be. Once you finish filling it out, you do not put your name on it. And by the way, there are no identifying questions. I don't even ask gender or age or anything like that. There are no identifying questions, okay? They're more general. Once you finish filling it out, I'll ask you to turn it over, and then we're going to collect them. And then when I have a pile of all of your questionnaires, I'm going to shuffle them like a brilliant card shark. Well, maybe not. I'll shuffle them as best I can, and then once they're all mixed up, I'm going to pass them back out so that each person who turned one in will now be holding one questionnaire, but it will not be your own. Okay? And then you will represent that person, and we will look at the data. Is that clear to everybody? Does everyone feel safe and like their confidentiality is protected? Couple things. I want you to write in boring colored ink. Blue or black. Fuchsia is not an anonymous color. Purple is not an anonymous color. Orange is not an anonymous color, nor is green. So I have extra pens, if anyone needs one.
Helpers?
Sure.
I can help too.
Okay.
All right, I'll just go on. Is that enough? So I feel like I have a lot
You
more.
do.
Okay.
Nice umbrella. Pen. Be better. Yeah. I hit somebody in the head the other day. Got it? Pens? Another thing I want to ask of you is don't start writing it, because I do want to say one more thing. Just make sure when everyone has their questionnaire and everyone has a pen, then I'll say one more thing and then you can start. First thing I want to make sure I say is that I want everyone to have privacy when you're writing. So if you're sitting next to your friend, feel free to come sit on the floor, take space, find a corner. Make believe, like in school, if you're taking a test, make believe it's like a test, hide your answers. Even if your best friend is sitting next to you, and even if you don't care, let's just make this a private experience. And that's one thing. So feel free to go sit in the corner in the back, wherever, take whatever space you need. Number two, there are directions which say many of the questions refer to the spectrum at the top of this page. And by the way, about that spectrum, 0 right now is other sex attracted. That's a sex not your own. Okay? 6 is same sex attracted. Sometimes people fill it out backward, which is the reason I'm saying it clearly. 0 is the equivalent of heterosexual. I don't even want to use those words here, but heterosexual direction. 6 is homosexual direction. Okay. Number 2, all questions that refer to sexual orientation refer only to consensual experience. Okay. This is another important thing. Something happened to you that wasn't consensual, don't count it, because that's not what we're trying to find out. And it's fine to put NA, not applicable, or to write in a comment for any of the questions. If something doesn't, a question you just can't fit inside of it, that's fine. Some people don't fit inside of it, because I want to say that really clearly. Not everybody fits inside of this frame. Now, one more thing. On the back of your other handout, your goldenrod handout, I put a very simple chart which says sex, gender identity, and gender expression. I think one of the biggest blinders that I see in the United States, and we have many blinders, is that we often conflate those things. We do not make a distinction between sex, gender, and sexual orientation. Even the New York Times uses the word gender when they mean sex because they don't want to use what word? Sex. Because the word sex has sex in it. Horrors, right? So I think that when I just want to clarify, like sex is between your, and one of the expressions I heard that was really was helpful to me was sex is between your legs, gender is between your ears. So you can identify as a man without having a male biological sex, right? Without having male bits, okay? And so I want to say this is, and I'm saying this for a really important reason. I want to disconnect those things because they don't all match up neatly. Not all males identify as men and act masculine, right? You can be male, identify as a woman, and act androgynous. Like they don't all have to line up in a neat thing. So that said, at the top of this thing right now it says same sex and other sex. If we switch this word to gender, same gender and other gender, some people would fill it out exactly the same way. But for some people that would change everything about the way you filled it out. Are you following this now? So for some people it wouldn't matter, for some people it would matter, it would make all the difference in the world. So what I'd like to ask you to do before you start filling it out is take out the word sex, cross out the word sex, and write in gender. Let's try that one. So gender is man, woman, as opposed to male, female, okay? And a continuum from one to the other, okay? And now, go ahead, once you're finished filling it out, just turn it over.
So in terms of if I identify as gender queer,
You're going to make the answers really interesting.
I'm going to need another one because I'm going to
Here they are. If anybody needs another sheet for any reason, I have more sheets here. Pen, of course. For you, my dear, yes. Oh, thank you. Sure. This will not be graded, and it is not the final exam. I'm not trying to rush anybody. I'm just collecting while you're filling it out. Don't worry. Upside down. Otherwise, it would be like one of those card tricks where. Thank you.
I'm not sure if I would have the same one as I did last year.
Well, that's an interesting thing. Say that later, because I think it's important. Somebody usually says that.
Really?
Yeah.
Are you trying to like half shuffle it as
Watch
you
me
pick
drop
them
the
up?
whole thing.
This is so difficult.
Yeah. Upside down. I'm getting a good workout here. Upside down. Yeah.
No, we're not close. No, it doesn't perform at all.
No, I mean like total performances, because I know like fish and chips.
Yeah, my mom. Okay, first of all, nothing romantic is going on. Second of all, it was very at all. I don't have to be romantic from love. I'm just saying, I'm already dating. I don't need this shit from you guys. I don't need this shit from you.
There are still a few people filling it out. But while they finish, I want to say a few things. One is I think another difference is that for some people, this is so easy to fill out. For other people, it's kind of hard. For other people, it's really hard. That's one thing. And another thing is you're about to hold somebody else's identity in your hot little hands. How should you treat that person's identity?
With respect.
With respect, with profound respect. I'll ask that you think about your own identity and think about the fact that someone else is going to be holding yours, and think about how you would like yours to be treated. And do exactly that for the person whose information you're holding. You won't know who they are, but they're a real person with a real identity. And I really think, you know that expression in the Bible, do unto others as you would have them do unto you? I think if we lived by that, in this regard, we'd be so much better off. We would be so much better off. So really think about profound respect. You might pull somebody's identity who's very much like you. You might pull someone who's very, very different from you. But either way, it's a real person with real feelings and real experience, okay? So just think about that respecting. Speaking of pulling someone who's very much like you, there's about a 2% chance that you might get back your own questionnaire. Not even 2%. If you did, how would we know?
You would make a big deal out of it.
We wouldn't know unless you said,
This is mine.
this is mine. Oh, that's mine. So don't. Okay, just don't. Just control yourself, okay? Put on your emotional brakes when you're looking at it. Put on your best poker face. Look down disinterestedly at your sheet. Study it. But don't burst out and say, oh, that's mine, because that would just kind of ruin everything, okay? Okay. That's the other important thing. What else do I want to say? For the rest of the program, from this moment forward, as soon as you get another sheet, you are going to represent somebody else. So from now on, when I say you, guess who I mean? This is you. You're going to be this person who you're representing, because somebody else is representing the real life you. Okay? Someone else has your information and is doing a job for that. So what we're going to be seeing in a minute is basically, we're going to be looking in the mirror as a group at ourselves and seeing what the people in this room look like as an overall group. Okay. Who has a questionnaire that I need to collect? Okay. Anyone else? Okay. So remember, profound respect. Control your emotions when you get back a sheet. Okay, and you is represented on a piece of green paper. Okay? Any questions? Thanks. Any questions? Okay, I need my trusty distributors. If you turn one in, you should get one back. It kind of works out magically that way. So when you get the sheet back, just study it for a second. Take a little look at it, get familiar with it.
You know what? If I get kidnapped and don't show up in the morning, that'll be my problem. So thank you. I have an extra.
Who wants an identity? Identities for sale? On sale? 50 cents? There'll be enough. It'll work out. 3 more? And you need one back here? 2. That's you. And that's you.
Here's an extra for someone who had to leave.
You need one? Yep. Everybody has one? I have one extra questionnaire from someone who had to leave. Will you represent who didn't do it? Okay, Carrie, good. I don't want to lose anybody from this because you're all equally important. Okay. Okay, now, in the front of the room, by some amazing miracle, a Kinsey-like scale miraculously appeared. while you were filling out the questionnaires. And it's here on the floor. 0 is down there to your left. 6 is at the other end to your right. I am standing on 3, which is the middle of the room, okay? What I'd like to ask you to do now, in a second, when I finish talking, is to stand up. And by the way, if anyone has mobility challenges and can't stand up, that's also fine. Just let me know. Or don't stand up, and I'll know because you didn't stand up. Come up to the front of the room and put yourself on the scale according to your person's #1 answer. But wait. What if your person put in a written answer or a blank or an NA? If that is the case for any answer, I'd like to ask you to step into the aisle a little bit so it's clear you're not on the scale for that answer. And I'm going to find out what's on your sheet, because I want to make sure that we represent every single person here, fairly and accurately. So another thing is that when you get on the numbers, there are a lot of you. So I'll ask you to try to kind of clump. If you're on 3, try to clump at 3. So it's clear that where 3 ends and 4 begins. If you have fractions, by the way, fractions are OK. Just go in between numbers.
What if you realize that you filled out your sheet backwards? And based on the things you've written, should we tell people to look over the whole thing?
What if you realize that you filled out your sheet backwards? It happens. I think maybe someone else filled it out backward in the other direction. I think we have to kind of let it go.
So just go with what she said?
Yeah, I mean, because hopefully someone else made the same mistake in the other direction, sure. Maybe. But it's one of those, it's actually, and I want to say as a researcher, it's one of the big challenges of research. You fill out a questionnaire and you try to draw these conclusions, but some people read the directions the wrong way, or they filled it out different, or they left out a really important set of the data, right? They didn't fill out a section of it. That's just the way it is. Only because it would be hard to figure out which one that was. Okay, so we'll work with it, we'll live with it. So we may have one person at least, or maybe 2 or 3 who are in the wrong numbers, but I think we'll still see what we need to see. Okay, everybody, come on up to the front. I'm getting out of the way. Sometimes I feel so lucky. I think every time I get to hold data in my hands, it's like researchers would drool for this. They would drool over this information, right? It's like I get all this fabulous data from you. Thank you. Okay, so you have 2 jobs right now. One of your jobs is to be data, right? Because you are representing. So one of your jobs is to be data. Your second job, though, is to be intelligent, thoughtful human beings and researchers, making sense of what you're seeing, making sense of the data. So make believe you're a brilliant research team, okay? And you're not only are you being data, but you're analyzing data. And I want to ask you to look not only at where people are at any given moment, but also watch movement. Watch what happens, okay? Just kind of watch not only where people are, but how people move, okay? Now, just looking at this data here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 24, 5, 6. 26 people on 0, I think. On 1, are you a fraction?
Me?
Yeah, no, you're on 0. On 1, how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 on 1. So 26, 7. You're fractions.
Yes.
They're almost always fractions. We have 2 people on 1.5, is it? Okay, so 26, 7, 2. We have 5 people on 2. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people on 3. 3 people on 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 on 5. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 on 6. Okay? So has anyone ever heard someone say there's no such thing as bisexuality? As researchers, looking at the data at this very moment, what would you say to that? True or false? False. Louder. False. Louder. False. I have done this exercise over 1,000 times. I have never seen a binary. Never. Not anywhere. Okay? Never. Not even in a random sample group. Not even in an intro to psychology class where everyone had to take the questionnaire. Never. Not once. That said, is this a random sample of the population? No. Definitely not, right? You chose to come here. Some of you are here for class. Some of you chose to come here, but you're not a random sample. You're a self-selected group. So if we went to the supermarket and got 60 people, 70 people, however many you are, to do this questionnaire there, would it look just like this? No. Might be a little different, right? On the other hand, if we went to Provincetown, Massachusetts, which is like gay Mecca, and we got people to fill it out there, would it look exactly like this? Where would there be more people? Which end of the scale? Right. If we went to the supermarket, there'd be more people down there. If we went to Provincetown, there'd be more people up there. Okay, so this is not a random sample. This is a sample of students at Grand Valley State University who chose to go to this program. But that said, I have still never seen a random sample, even in random audiences, ever. Okay? Now, is this a bell curve? Has anyone ever heard someone say, oh, sexuality is a bell curve? I've heard that. Never seen that either. Oh, I saw it once. I saw it last year at a bi conference. and everybody got up and went in the room, and I thought, oh, wow, that's the first time I've ever seen a bell curve. But there was a reason for that. It was a bi conference, right? Beautiful. What we have here is actually what I call a barbell curve, except that the zero side of the barbell is heavier than the other one. But it is. It's like widest at the two ends. Actually not. 5 and 6. Let's take 5 and 6 at one end and then 0 at the other end. And then 2, 3, 4, 5 are the bar. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4 are the bar. Okay, so 5 and 6 together, you're one of the ends. And you two are, 0 is one of the ends. That's what it kind of looks like to me from up here. Okay, now we're going to go through the questions. And I would like to ask... Explain, yeah. We're going to go through the questions. I'd like to ask you to move according to your person's answers, okay? If your person has... Oh, I want to tell one more story first. I did this in a school in Wisconsin a few years ago, and it was required that people came. People were required to attend. It was required that they attend. And one of the people who brought me there pulled a sheet that was all zeros. And so as she was standing down at the 0 end, she had lots of time to look around at other 0 sheets, other sheets of people who were standing at 0. And what she noticed was that there were a bunch of guys in the room whose sheets did not say 0, who did not move off 0 for the entire exercise. And it just, I think, brought home to me how scary it can be for people to even represent someone else. I mean, these guys should have been intelligent enough to know that we knew it wasn't their sheet. But yet, it was still scary for them to represent. And that made me sad. But it also made me want to remind people that we know it's not you. We know you're holding someone else's sheet. So if it's scary to you, even if you're a 6 and it's scary for you to hold a 0 sheet, you're representing someone, so do them right. Okay? We know you're not holding your own sheet. Okay, now I'm going to go through the questions. Your sexual attractions overall. Question 2, part 1. Now, researchers, did we just see some motion? There was some movement. Was it dramatic? It was subtle, but it was there, right? And I include this question on purpose because for some people, thinking about sexuality, they might think sexual orientation is your sexual attractions. It's what words you choose will determine what answers you get, and even a slight change in word will sometimes result in different data, in different results. Because I think it's very interesting that attractions and orientation are not the same thing. So that's just one thing. If you're ever doing research, think about the subtleties of language and the importance of individual words. Maybe do some pre-testing. Do the test a few times and see what happens when you switch around words. See if it changes the data. Okay? I never thought about that until I started doing this, and I started realizing these words really matter. And by the way, I change these words every probably about twice a year. I revise this questionnaire based on what I'm seeing and what I'm learning to try to come up with the less imperfect word or a more perfect word, or to change it. And there's actually one question here that wasn't in last year's version, which I'll tell you later. But I think that language is so important. Okay, ready? Your sexual attractions before age 16. Love this. Wow, researchers, what just happened?
That was a migration.
There was a migration in what direction, researcher?
That was a migration. Almost the entire room moved this way. Almost the entire room.
How many, raise your hand if you moved towards 0. If you moved towards 0. Look around. Wow, almost everyone who, okay, raise your hand if you moved towards 6. Ah, some people did though. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But the overall trend was definitely towards 0. I call that straightening up. Okay, your sexual attractions in 2010. And your sexual attractions in the past month. Past month. Somebody has an interesting story. Yeah, so a lot of people moved, even between 2010 and the past month. There was some significant movement. And for a couple of people, significant movement. Okay. Now, next question, your sexual experience. Oh, by the way, there's one person off the scale. Does it say NA? Your sexual experience, including making out before age 16. NA's off the chart. Okay, researchers. What happened? What did we do? We just straightened up a lot. And by the way, we also have people overboard. A lot of people are off the chart. A lot of people are off the chart. And if this were a ship, what would have just happened? We just capsized straight side. We'd be in the water, all of us, because there's definitely not enough ballast to hold up the ship on this end. Okay, your sexual experience, including making out in 2010.
Let's see how many people leave me.
Not too many. And you still have a lot of people off the ship. And we'll find out in a minute. We have extra 6s. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and we only had 1, 9. No, we had 9 to start with?
I think we had 9.
Yeah, we had 9. Okay, but every number, by the way, is still represented. If anyone can't see the whole room, every number is still represented. And your sexual experience, including making out in the past month. Okay, we still have a lot of people who are NA. And I just want to point something out here. What do we have the closest thing we've seen to so far? We have the closest thing to a binary that we've seen so far. Okay? What might explain the more binary shape that we're seeing for this past month question?
A lot of people are monogamous, so in the past month they probably have a boyfriend or a girlfriend
Right.
that they're sticking with.
Right. So if you're in a relationship and it's monogamous, or even perhaps if it's not, a month is not that much time, right? So you might just be with one partner. And even if you're totally promiscuous, is a month a long period of time? Do you also have schoolwork and jobs, right? So there are lots of things that could explain that month thing, right? And I think we'll find that for the month questions, we'll see them more binary, especially for relationship kinds of questions. And we'd still have a whole lot of NAs. I want to also give honor to that. And one thing that I see sometimes is, and you didn't do it, I'm very proud of you. Sometimes when people step off the chart, I hear kind of like, you're off the chart. Like some kind of like giggling or tittering, like isn't that funny that you're an NA? But I want to just say something about that for a minute. It didn't happen here, and I'm very proud of you. But here's a true-false question. For people of your age, true or false, we live in a culture that makes us feel guilty if we are sexually active. True or false?
True. False. False a little bit.
A lot.
Okay. It's complicated, huh? But overall, yes, but with complications, would you go with that? And how about especially if we are women?
True.
I think it's especially true for women. Okay, second question. True or false? We live in a culture where we're made to feel guilty if we're not being sexually active. True or false?
True.
Especially if we're men?
True. True.
So who gets to not feel guilty?
Plants.
My tomato plant gets to not feel guilty, right? So I think this is a really important point, though, because we live in this very guilt-driven culture around sex and sexuality. And it's a culture where you can't win. It's set up so you can't win. The deck is stacked. You cannot do it right, because if you're sexual, you're doing it wrong. If you're not sexual, you're doing it wrong. And do we sometimes reinforce that in our own social circles? Have you ever been in a group of your friends and had one of your friends make fun of one of your other friends for being sexually active? Yes, true or false?
True.
Most of you said yes. A few people said no. And have you ever been in a room with a bunch of your friends and had one of your friends ragging on another one of your friends for not getting any or for not being sexually active?
True.
So this is the clue here. I think we can intervene in this kind of behavior. It's the same way that when you hear racist behavior or homophobic behavior, that like it's an obligation to speak up and stop it, right? I think this is similar. That if you hear people trying to make someone else feel guilty, even if it's joking, it's not necessarily funny to that person. I want to just ask for your help in kind of intervening, because who should get to decide whether you are or aren't sexually active?
You.
Who should get to decide whether you are or aren't sexually active?
You.
You and nobody else. And this is something that, and by the way, this is not I'm not talking abstinence here. I'm not saying, oh, I think abstinence is great. And nor am I saying I think everybody should go have sex all the time. I'm not saying that either, neither of those things. What I'm saying, this is a very pro-choice statement. I believe that it's up to us to choose what makes sense for us. And one time I said that and someone got really upset and said, well, no, my religion says blah, blah, blah. And that's also part of what I'm saying, though. If that's what you believe, then that's your choice, right? Whatever you believe is right for you. You know, and also you know yourself better than anyone else. You know what you're ready for or not ready for. You know what you're comfortable with or not comfortable with. So I just want to really ask you to stay with your own self and don't let anyone else make you feel guilty. There's a great song that goes, don't shit on me and I won't shit on you. And I think it applies to this topic. You are the agent of your own decisions. It should be only up to you and no one else, based on what you believe, what you know, and how you feel, okay? Is everyone with me on that? And again, this is not pro or against anything. It's really pro you. It's in support of you, making your own choices. Okay, guilt-free society. I feel better. That was my only preach, by the way. But for me, this is a really important topic, because I think that in our culture, there's so much guilt around sexuality that is destructive. When we feel guilty, we don't make smart decisions. We make stupid decisions. We make decisions based on pressure or what we think we should, whatever. I think that's wrong. Okay, I feel better. Okay, your fantasies before age 16. What was the trend of motion there, researchers? We trend towards straightening up, but not as dramatic. Not as dramatic, right, as for the other behavioral questions. And how many people, did anyone go away from 0 for that question just now? 1, 2, 3, 4. We had some people who came in this direction instead, which is also interesting. And I just want to say that there's a coming out model that a lot of people have in their heads, that if you're not straight, you're really gay, right? And that you go about figuring that out as you climb up the scale until you get to 6, at which point you get your prize and you've won and you're done. That's not the way reality works. For some people, in fact, that is what happens. But for other people, you can go up or down, or up and down, or down and up, or like, it's not so simple. There are many other people whose journey is much less linear. Okay? Your fantasies in 2010. How many people moved upward? Raise your hand. How many people moved downward? Raise your hand. You did, didn't you? Yeah, you moved downward. You moved from 6 to 3, right? Yeah, so again, it's mostly in that direction, but not only. Your fantasies in the past month. Yours says NA? And also, we have one person who's been NA, and there were more people for the before age 16 and a couple of the other questions. And when people say to me, oh, everyone fantasizes, I almost always have at least 1 or 2 people who stand off that chart, so I don't believe that either. Okay? All right, now your next question is your romantic emotional attractions before age 16. Capsize the ship. Wow. I think 0 is almost twice as large as it was before. Okay. In 2010, romantic 2010. Get an exercise? Yeah. Romantic past month. Okay, now everybody go to your number 1 answer where you started. Go to where you started. Question 1. I want to do an audience data poll, a data survey. Okay, data. How many people have not yet moved at all? For any of the questions? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Less than about 30% of our zeros have not yet moved at all. How many of you have moved, but you've stayed within, say, 2 points of the scale, 0, 1, 3, 4, whatever? Raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Almost the rest of our zeros. Most of our 1s. Half of our 2s. 2/3 of our 4s. 2 of our 3 4s. 2 of our 6 5s, whatever. 3 of our 5s. A lot of our 5s and 1 of our 6s. 2 of our 6s. And how many of you have moved but you stayed within a 4-point spread? Our remaining 0 probably. A 1, half of our 2s, our 3s, 2 of our 5s, and 1 of our 6s. And how many of you have gotten an aerobic workout by moving even more than that? 3 of our 6s, a 5, 2 of our 5s, 1 of our 4s, 1 of our 1s, another 1 of our 0s. So this is a really important piece of data that you're seeing right now. Because when we try to understand, when you hear comments like, everyone's really bisexual, no one's really bisexual, bisexuality doesn't exist, it's universal. When we try to understand the world, whose eyes do we look through? Whose experience do we filter that through? We filter it through our own experience, and then we try to make sense of other people based on what we know. And I think that's what often leads to questions, statements like that. Because I've seen from doing this work that there are some people who experience their sexuality as fixed, almost like it's in stone, it's in marble, right? Unchanging, unchangeable. And for some people like that, the question of sexual fluidity might seem like a really strange question, like why? No, of course not. Of course it's not fluid, right? Because for them it's not. And then there are some people who experienced a little bit of movement, and then a moderate amount, and then up to a tremendous amount of movement. And I know that this happens because like I'm married to a woman who, my Grand Valley wife, she's would have been a 6 on almost every question. And I know, and I'm confessing here, I know sometimes I look at Peg and I think, how can it be so simple? There's part of me that just wants to go, I want to find some hidden complexity there. I want to, somehow it's hard, I want to find it. I want her to say something different than what she says, but I also know that that is her experience. And I know that sometimes she looks at me and she just thinks, forget about it, right? But I know that the one thing that makes our marriage work is that I know that no matter what I feel, that is her experience and that is her reality. And no matter what she feels, that is my experience and that is my reality, and we believe that about each other. And so to understand someone else's experience doesn't necessarily mean to share it. It can be to understand that it's very different from your own as well. Okay? So hold that piece of data with you. Okay. Where do your closest family members think you are on the scale? Bye-bye. Where'd all the upper numbers go? But how many of you were on 6 the whole time? How many of you moved to 6 just now? Anybody? We have 4, almost all of the people who are standing on 6 now moved to 6 for this question. Most of the people who are actually on 6 moved somewhere else. If you were on 6 before for question 1, raise your hand. They're on 0, on 2, on 3, on 2. So these are all like a brand new set of 6s, newly minted, just for parents. So our parents don't necessarily know who we are, huh? Okay, and we definitely saw some straightening up. How about the 3s? How many of you were really on 3? Are really on 3?
No, I started on 3.
You started on 3, you started on 3, you started on 3. So half of our 3s became 3s. And how many of our 0s became 0s? Raise your hand if you weren't on 0 before. Raise your hand if you just became a 0 just now. A lot. Okay, next question. Where do most of your friends from high school think you are on the scale?